We received a really interesting message from someone who follows this channel, and this video actually came out of her email question. I always tell people to send in their questions because this one in particular felt worth addressing. She explained that she grew up with two narcissistic parents, and throughout her whole life, her experience was that everyone else viewed her parents as wonderful people. But that clearly wasn't what she lived through. She said she had an understanding of them that no one else seemed to have. That said, I do want to mention there's a positive ending to this story, because the good news is that the woman who wrote in told me she no longer questions what she's witnessing or what she witnessed because she's genuinely put in the effort, the research, the self-education, the inner work, and reached a point of real trust in herself. She believes what she sees, even when nobody else backs her up. And that right there is what healing actually looks like. But the real question here is, what do you do when it seems like everybody else adores the narcissistic person or people in your life except you? When you're the one who sees them clearly and nobody else does. Now, in her email, she used past tense, so I couldn't tell whether her parents are still living or still part of her life. I honestly don't know. It was a really thoughtful question, and it stuck with me because this isn't really the typical pattern. Usually a narcissistic person behaves badly enough that at least one other person notices, though that person may never actually say anything to you about what they've seen. But the situation where this tends to happen most is within families. In her case, it was her parents. That tracks. For others of you watching, maybe it played out with grandparents, aunts, uncles, or siblings, and it is isolating, genuinely, to feel like you're the only one who actually experiences this behavior or recognizes it as the problem it truly is. That said, the more common outcome is that narcissistic people can't fully contain themselves, and over time they tend to reveal more of it. So other people usually do witness the narcissistic behavior, they just don't label it that way, or more accurately, they refuse to. They make excuses, they enable, they fall back on empty phrases like nobody's perfect. But that's a privilege reserved for people who aren't close to the narcissist. That privilege isn't available to the people nearest to them. The woman who wrote this letter, given her situation with narcissistic parents, well, a child is about as close to the situation as a person can get. And your early years get molded by a narcissistic parent's selfishness, entitlement, and everything that comes with it. As a kid, you don't get a choice. And while adults around the situation can step back, leave, distance themselves, or make excuses to protect their comfortable status quo, a child doesn't have that option. So my guess, in response to the question, is that other people probably did notice something, just less intensely, without the words to describe it, and more concerned with preserving that status quo. There's no question that the people closest to a narcissist absorb the most exposure. They're essentially ground zero, the epicenter where the toxicity hits hardest. This is especially true for a child raised by narcissistic parents, whose whole framework for relationships and safety gets built around self-abandonment, constant hypervigilance, staying invisible, and being, at best, an afterthought. And I want to circle back to that point. A child has no choice in the matter. So that child, even once they become an adult, carries the imprint of that early environment, but that same adult also has a distinctive vantage point. It's entirely possible that other people in a narcissistic child's life never experience the same narcissistic nonsense, or certainly not to the degree that child did from their parent. My honest take is that these other people probably do notice some of it, but they're either deliberately ignoring it, caught up in their own form of betrayal blindness, or flat out enabling, or maybe there's a cultural element where this kind of behavior gets a pass. Narcissists also tend to have different modes depending on who they're around and how well they can regulate themselves internally. When they're with people where image, praise, and admiration matter, performing for outsiders or a crowd, say, in front of a boss, a community figure, someone they admire, or anyone with fame, wealth, power, or status, the narcissist might come across as humble, even generous, maybe the life of the party, but there's always a price to pay after those moments of fake humility and generosity. The people nearest to them, the ones already bearing the brunt of daily life with them, are the ones who will face the rage, shame, and envy afterward. Once the narcissist is away from that pressure to impress, The resentment starts leaking out. Why isn't it me who's the boss? That guy's a jerk. I'm just as talented. Or complaints about spending hundreds of dollars on dinner that nobody even asked for. All of that gets unloaded onto you. So you're on the receiving end of their bad behavior, while the people who saw them earlier that day saw none of it. Narcissists can sustain the appearance of greatness for a while. It's the people closest to them, especially those with the least power, who see what's really going on. Then there's the matter of self-regulation. Just to recap, regulation is how we handle our emotions. Most of us process them fairly well. We talk about them, express them appropriately, avoid taking them out on others, and make sense of them. Narcissists, on the other hand, simply don't know how to do that. Instead, they rely on other people to regulate for them, using projection, anger, outbursts, the silent treatment, criticism, insults, and sometimes even aggression or violence to settle themselves. And once again, the people closest to them become the outlet, the emotional punching bags they use to calm down, which is exactly why so few outsiders ever witness or experience this side of them. They tend to keep it contained within the household. Narcissists regulate through their spouses, partners, kids, parents, friends, or employees. Everyone outside that inner circle gets to keep believing the narcissist is simply a great person. But eventually, the cracks tend to show even beyond that inner circle. When enough goes wrong, when particularly things the narcissist perceives as unjust, their dysregulation and frayed nerves start surfacing in more public settings. Other people may start to notice, though a lot depends on how large the narcissist's social circle actually is and whether anyone within it is actually speaking up. So, for the woman who sent this question, and for many of you dealing with something similar, it might simply be that you haven't yet had the chance to openly discuss the narcissist with others. I'll admit, this question landed at an interesting moment for me because something similar had just happened within my own extended family. I'd watched these patterns play out for years with a particular relative. I noticed some of it as a kid, obviously without any language for it at the time. Then, as I got older, I started making excuses for it. Eventually, it all crystallized when real pressure hit that part of the family system. Nobody had ever addressed it, and this person was, and still is, regarded as some kind of successful, admirable figure. This person did some genuinely troubling things, and no one ever spoke up. Then they did something like that right in front of me, and I finally brought it up to one relative who said, No, that's not right. I never saw that. You're misreading it." Then I mentioned it to someone else who confirmed they'd seen it too, which really helped me trust my own perception since I trusted that person's judgment. Eventually, once it became undeniable, another relative admitted to their own experience with this person, someone who had historically enabled them. That admission carried real weight, and her husband agreed with me too. Still, in a lot of families, including in the story I just shared from my own life, you often feel like you're the only one experiencing it, or at least the first one to recognize it, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime. This isn't limited to families of origin either. It can happen with spouses too. And the people around you might be genuinely shocked if you ever separate or divorce, saying things like, "Wow, I really thought you two had such a great marriage. They seem so cool." The same thing can happen with close friendships, coworkers, or bosses, where the people closest to the narcissist bear the brunt of their behavior while everyone else is saying, "Come on, aren't they great?" This contradiction is exactly what makes the emotional abuse within narcissistic relationships so hard to recognize and validate. Now, going back to the encouraging part, the hopeful takeaway from the letter I received is that this woman no longer second guesses what she witnessed in her parents, regardless of what the rest of the world believes about them. Because that, ultimately, is what healing means, and it's not a simple process. Trusting your own experience, even when the world tells you otherwise. Trusting your read on someone. Being able to take actions that protect your safety and ultimately support your growth. That becomes far harder to achieve when the people around you aren't just failing to support you, but actively disagree, refuse to see it, and leave you feeling like you're the only one dealing with their narcissistic behavior. I'm confident that in most cases, unless someone's social circle is extremely small, you're not truly the only one experiencing it. You may just be the only one willing to name it and see the behavior for exactly what it is. Please keep sending in your questions. A lot of them aren't only relevant to the person asking, they resonate with so many others too. Thanks again.